We're going to start this live event now. All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Hello. Welcome to our first live streamed home team-based meeting of the board. And just wanted to start off very quickly before we get going, even though we don't have our meeting at the board office. We're still going to provide the audio-visual recording notice because we will be putting this meeting live. So for those in attendance, which would be us here, just a reminder that as per policy 1204, bylaws of the board, the regular meeting of the Board of Education will be recorded and may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board also reserves the right to edit or by motion of the board at any meeting, choose not to stream live or archive a meeting or portion thereof. So I'm going to just quickly, before I call the meeting to order, just introduce everybody who is here. So trustees present, there is myself, Megan Dykeman, I'm board chair, trustee Shelley Coburn, trustee Suzanne Perot, trustee Rod Ross, vice chair David Todd, trustee Tony Ward, and trustee Marnie Wilson. So we're all excited to be back. And our staff present with us tonight virtually are Superintendent Gert Stewart, Secretary Treasurer Brian Isley, Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent Mal Gill, Assistant Secretary Shin Chand, Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan, our Communications Manager Joanne Abshire, our Executive Assistant Judy Swanson, and we do have our partner groups joining us online tonight. We're so happy that you're able to join us. We have QP 1260 President Raylene Shalot. We have LTA President Tanya Kerr. Joining us, we also have LTA Vice President Darren Starsley. We have our DPAC President Alicia Rempel, and our Langley Principals and Vice Principals Association President John Cusick. So welcome and thank you for joining us online here. I know things are a little different. The meetings will look a little different, but we're really happy to be able to provide this live streaming opportunity so that the board's business and governance can continue. So with that, it's now 7:02. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that the Langley School District is located on the traditional lands of the Kwantlen, Katzie, Matsqui, and Semiahmoo First Nations. So with that, we do have a report from in-camera Vice Chair Todd. I'm going to slide you up here. Where are you? Todd, sorry, as we're all moving through this. And, oh, there we go, sorry. Just takes a minute to find everybody. There you go.
Thank you. This evening, the in-camera committee met and we discussed property, legal, and personnel.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so now we are on to our consent agenda. So it's going to be a bit different because you can't actually see everybody at once. So what we're doing is we are, instead of voting to approve, we will be doing what's called a negative vote. So in the event that there is somebody who is opposed to a motion, they will state their opposition to the motion. If there is no statement of opposition, then it's assumed that you are in agreement with the motion, that you're approving the motion. So once again, we'll be doing a statement of opposition instead, which you do with telephone calls or situations like this where you can't see everybody at the same time. So we're moving now on to the consent agenda. So could I please, I'm watching the chat here, get a mover for the consent agenda. Trustee Ross has moved. Trustee Perot has seconded. Is there any opposition to anyone opposed to the consent agenda? Second call, anybody opposed to the consent agenda? Seeing no opposition, sorry?
Yes, sorry, I typed it in, but I don't know if you could see it. I would like to pull item 4.1 for discussion.
Sure, all right, so we're putting motion 4.1. All right, so that would be the minutes. All right, so that one's coming off and we'll go just above our superintendent, just above our consideration agenda. So that'll become for 5.1. And then we are going to vote on the rest of the consent agenda. I see a mover and a seconder, and all those are in favor, other than that item, of the consent agenda. So the consent agenda as amended is adopted. Carried. All right. So now we're on to the minutes, which is 4.1. Could I please, we'll need to get a mover for the minutes. So a mover for the minutes, please. 4.1 has been pulled from the consent agenda, so we are now approving the minutes on. All right, so I have Trustee Wilson has moved the minutes, and who would like to second the minutes? Seconder for the minutes, please. Please raise your hand if you'd like to second the minutes if you haven't been able to type them in here. Trustee Ross is seconding the minutes. All right, any errors or omissions on the minutes?
Yes, can I just speak or, okay.
Well, the minutes are being adopted, so there'd have to be an error or an omission on the minutes.
Oh, okay, so this isn't where we discuss.
Well, minutes are a record of the meeting, so when you receive the minutes, they're either accurate or they're not, but we don't discuss them, so you're approving the minutes.
I had a question about them.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Trustee Wilson.
Okay, so regarding 11.1 in the minutes, where there was an election for a vice chair called, it shows that Trustee Coburn abstained, but according to policy 1204, all trustees present at a meeting must vote. So my question is, whose job is it to enforce the policies of the board?
So under Robert's Rules of Order, any person can choose to abstain. You can't make a person vote. Our policy does reflect that you have to vote on a motion, but there's no way to enforce a person voting on a motion, and our bylaw is actually silent on what happens with that vote. So some organizations might have a bylaw that says if you abstain, your vote is in the affirmative or the negative. This bylaw isn't. It doesn't have that. So in the event that a person doesn't vote on something, then the past practice of the board, and you can see that in historical cases, has been to reflect that the person hasn't voted and they're just not counted as a vote as per Robert's Rules of Order because our bylaws are silent on it. So where our bylaws are silent, we refer to Robert's Rules of Order. So, all right. Thank you. Okay, so I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes. Trustee Wilson's asked the question. I see no further discussion on the minutes. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please, anybody opposed to approving the minutes? Forgot we're doing the negative. Anybody opposed to approving the minutes? All right, seeing no opposition to approving the minutes are adopted as presented. All right, we are now on to number 5, which is consideration of the remainder of the agenda. So could I please get a mover for the agenda? Moved by Trustee Ross and seconded by Trustee Perot. Any additions to the agenda, changes of order? Seeing none, are there any opposition to adopting the agenda as presented? Any opposition to adopting the agenda as presented? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted as presented. And we are now on to the superintendent's report. Over to you, Superintendent Stewart.
Thank you, Board Chair Dykeman, and I'll just we'll have our PowerPoint just put up. So thanks, Woody. So I'll get started here, and just before we just show a couple of videos here, just what I'm going to take the opportunity each time we have any kind of public setting, given the challenge and that we're facing right now around the COVID-19 crisis, is to update the public. We've been doing that every week, either through a video, through newsletters, through websites, and an incredible amount of information going on. And we want to try to make sure that our community is kept up to date as well as possible as we go through this. Before I start, I would like to certainly acknowledge the appreciation from our staff towards our trustees. in terms of the work you're doing with community during this time and your support for all staff as we work through this. And you need to know that we don't take that lightly. And all of you have extended your support to me, both personally and to everyone in the organization. And I want to let you know that I take every opportunity to share that with staff. To our administrators, teachers, support staff throughout the system, absolutely incredible work being done on behalf of children and families. We're going to share much of that tonight with you also. But this is certainly something we were not, when we started out in September, in any way anticipated anywhere in the world, let alone provincially or in our district. And to see people step up given these circumstances and the time they're dedicating and their commitment is really impressive. And it makes you very proud to be part of the Langley School District when you see this happen. And to our families, thank you for working alongside us. You know, we've appreciated the patience. We've done our very best to try to connect with families through this and to try to make sure you have the supports needed as you go forward. And also to students, very challenging. Remote learning is certainly, you know what, for any of us, it can be, there's certainly some difficulties around it. And we know that it's not going to work for everyone, and we're going to have to certainly in the days ahead tackle a blended model of some sort to address it. But I wanted to make sure before I launched into this that I take any time that I can do something publicly to make sure I always say thank you for everyone involved in making this happen. What you're going to see right off the bat is we're going to show you a couple of videos. Joe Abshire continues to do outstanding work as our communications manager, and you've seen these car rallies in the community. Really, people love them. Our kids miss teachers, teachers miss kids, and our support staff and our administrators. This is a time where, you know, when people are kind of doing the isolation, that they want to still be able to find ways to connect. And the latest one in Aldergrove, starting with Aldergrove Secondary, and they started there and then they kind of stopped by each school and picked up more cars along the way. It really warms your heart. And also a second video in terms of we have a teacher. That just shows you, how creative people can be during this process, named Jen Fernandez at Lynn Fripps. And she came up with a 3D printer, something called ear savers for all of our frontline folks that are struggling with these masks all the time. And you can imagine having those around your head. And again, it can be quite irritating in terms of your ears. And they came up with this neat idea of how to help. And we'll share these with you, and we'll play those too. And I just thought a great way to have a wave of some optimism during what is obviously a pretty challenging time. So I'll put it to you, Woody.
We have a very exciting day today. We have all 4 of our Aldergrove schools participating together in our car rally. This is a very exciting event for our Aldergrove community. We have all of our staff members here participating today. The families are really excited to see all of us today.
We wanted to get out there, and it's a bit therapeutic for the teachers as much as it is for the students. I mean, our main focus this year has been connection, belonging, and care. And so I think we wanted to send the message today to the families that, hey, we're here for you, be strong. We're going to get through this together. We're walking alongside you in this, and we'll do anything that we can to continue to support you. And students, be strong, be courageous, be resilient. We'll see you soon. Care about you lots.
Five or 6 days ago, there was somebody by the name of Jennifer Reevely, a nurse at Royal Columbian. She was looking for somebody to 3D print a design called an ear saver. She had friends, colleagues of hers, who would get bleeding behind the ears, a lot of rashes, irritation. So an ear saver is basically a 3D printed prototype that has little teeth or claws, I guess, that would hold on to the elastic bands of the N95 surgical mask. So far, I've had an order for about 500. I think we're up to 550 now. I've been able to send out about 160 out the door. All these frontline workers that are working so hard, I think they deserve something like this to help save their ears. And if I can be at home and it takes me just a little bit of time to set this up and a little bit of time to set my timer and come in and print these, then that's what I'm going to do to help.
Yeah, well done. You know what, a rather dapper looking Jonathan Harris there in the car rally video. How many of our schools have taken part in these things? Been fantastic. Again, for anyone, if there's concerns around Fraser Health, they've approved these. They did, we put out all kinds of notice about certainly the physical distancing before these are undertaken. Lots of planning goes for it, but boy, you saw those kids jumping up and down on the sidewalk, and you know, how pleased there to see people going by. I think it's, you got to find, you know, Bonnie Henry has never said we can't stop, you know, trying to find ways to connect. We got to connect differently, but I love seeing that occur. And way to go to Jen, you know, in terms of her work, just example of the creativity in terms of what people are bringing to this, in terms of stepping up to help. So just a couple of examples. There's many out there. We'll continue to feature those. You can see them on our websites too. And again, we're trying to do everything we can to put those things out. I'm going to give a few kind of, you know, broad themes that have come out provincially, and then I'm going to have staff speak to the specifics around what we're doing as a district. But in terms of really where we all share in common is there's still a strong element of a culture of fear out there for good reason. I mean, Bonnie Henry has, you know, done an incredible job, a fantastic role model, and she's really wanted to impress upon us. We have to be careful. And people are taking that to heart, as they should. And you know, and if she has said, if you can work from home, great. If you can do that, certainly if you're out, you know, certainly be mindful in terms of making sure, again, you continue to wash your hands and keeping that 2 meters apart. And these are all good things. But while we're in that mode, you can certainly understand where people are very reticent then about, okay, how does the education system fit within that? We're supposed to support our frontline workers, and they need childcare, and they need their kids getting an education, and who's going to come into these places, and are they safe? And I think we're working very hard, and certainly Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan will speak to this later in terms of doing everything we can to make sure that our places are safe, but we're all wrestling with it. And I will also talk a little bit in terms of that transition back to class that you recently would have heard in terms of from the Premier come out that, you know what, that element, unless that starts to be eroded, it's making people very, very nervous out there, anxious in terms of kind of, you know, in terms of working within the education sector along with anything else. And it's something we do have to acknowledge. Essential service workers, what can we say? How many of us are our hearts out to them and our appreciation for the great work they're doing day in and day out to help all of us. We are certainly doing our part here, and Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill will speak to that too. I had the great opportunity today to go out and visit all 5 of our hubs. I made sure about the physical distancing, don't worry, and I made sure I washed my hands. But I got to tell you, being cooped up in a place, only staring at a screen, you can only take so much. And I needed to get out there too. And oh man, it's impressive to see what staff have done here with these sites. And again, I'll let certainly Mel speak to more of it, but it's something we're all wrestling with. We're at different levels. And certainly as we start to move to how do you meet tier 2, which is much greater in terms of where we need to go with that particular group, in terms of needs, in terms of sheer size, and our vulnerable learners. I'm just letting you know, these are ones that we're all wrestling throughout the province in terms of how to address these needs. The continuity of learning piece, Director of Instruction, Don Tomlinson, and Assistant Superintendents, Woody Bradford and Mel Gill, they are doing incredible work here with all the staff in terms of, you know, finding new ways to continue on with our learning. Again, you're seeing throughout provincially, not many places were set up well. They didn't have a Teams platform. They didn't have, you know, the devices on the scale we do. They didn't have the infrastructure to be able to kind of launch this. And we do know while there'll need to be some kind of a blend for some, it's still, I really, again, I'm amazed at how quickly people have pulled stuff together here going forward. And again, these are the wrestles going really, again, throughout the province. But the last bullet I want to speak to a little bit more in depth, because I want to make sure that kind of calm the waters a bit. Our Minister of Education, Rob Fleming, yesterday, he was trying to do the same and say, hold it. We said maybe back to class in mid-May to end of May. And the key word is May. There's, you know, they want to try to get the economy going, and certainly having the education system be able to provide supports for parents so that they can do these things absolutely makes sense. But there does need to be a number of things in place before we get there. And I'll get Woody to slide to the next slide there. But some of the things we're going to have to think about is what I just talked about, the culture of fear. And I put that one as the bottom bullet there, public confidence. I think if we put kids into the buildings tomorrow, there'd be a number of parents who say, hey, no, I'm not ready for this. Are they safe? We have to be able to demonstrate that. And it certainly has to be addressed, and certainly bring up the confidence of a number of our staff going forward. How many in a classroom? What grades are we looking at? Are we starting with kindergarten to grade 3 like they have in some countries, because I feel that the risk student to student is minimal, and certainly students to adult in those cases tends to be much less significant. And also our grade 12s, are we starting with a few, and then how do you kind of, are these in shifts? Are they half days? Well, many parents communicated to me they don't like half days. Makes it very awkward for them. It's not going to allow them to get back to work. Is it going to be a full day and staggered days? Might be a possibility. If people need transportation, what does that look like? I'm maintaining these high cleaning standards right now at our 5 hubs, and we have the rest of the place in good shape, but I don't have students for the most part in those other buildings. 43 sites. What's it going to be like to maintain those cleaning standards if we have to access all of them? You know, if we start having 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 students accessing our buildings, and that physical distancing, you know what? How many kindergartens and grade 1s are going to be able to stay away from each other? They like being around each other and crowding each other and touching each other and everything else. You can imagine there'll be some concern there, absolutely. Access to the buildings as parents want to drop off. What does that look like? And how do you do that in an orderly manner? And also, what are we doing as a province? Because if we don't do this together, you can't have one situation in Abbotsford and another situation in Langley where we're kind of saying, hey, we're all in. And if Abbotsford says, well, we're not yet. And people say, well, how do I go to work if I don't have those kind of needs met in my community? So I do think provincially there'll need to be some directive about people going back to work en masse to be able to do this if we're going to be able to try to do this right. I'm just raising those because really people need to be conscious of the fact this isn't happening tomorrow. I think what the government's really looking at is they're nervous about the fall, to be quite honest with you. And I think they're trying to see, can we try some things middle of May to June to kind of put our toe in the water, so to speak, just to see how these things can, work so we can learn, and possibly that can inform us for the fall. But seeing what we, regular sessions in like we had before spring break, that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen before the end of June. You will see some kind of blended model at best. Particularly, we have to do more for these vulnerable students, where the gaps will only continue to get greater if we don't find a way to get them in some fashion. And also the tier 1, tier 2 essential service workers. That's a big group of people. How are we going to be able to try to do that in an orderly way? So putting it on out there, but I want to let people know a lot of work would have to take place yet. And one spike, and all of a sudden everything's shut down again, as we know, or a number of cases in schools, and we could see this all in jeopardy once again. So I think Bonnie Henry wants to be cautious for all the right reasons, and I don't think you're going to see her jumping into this anytime soon. And when we do, I think she's going to very closely monitor the situation going forward. The next slide there, Woody. A couple of other things too, and I continue to impress upon folks. We know that if this is the reality that we're going to live in for a while, that plenty of learning can still take place. I keep mentioning to parents every chance I get, we need your support with this. There is some mixed messaging that floats out there to say learning's done, and I'm just automatically getting a pass, socially promoted no matter what. And really, we don't want that to be the message, because we want students to recognize that, again, teachers are putting a ton of work in to be able to kind of continue that learning on. We want kids to be embracing that versus them falling further and further behind going forward. And these are all quotes of these 3 slides off of the ministry website. I encourage you, parents, to take a look at this, because there's some great information on there. The following slide, again, is quoted, yes, all students will receive, again, a final grade. There will be a final grade issued for all of our kids, K through 12. And also in terms of the ministry's also made it clear, no student will be given a free pass. Students are expected to continue their learning for each course they enrolled in, and expected to demonstrate that they know and understand the learning standards. So again, I'm going to keep going with that one, because I really do want to make sure that kids take the work seriously that's going to be put in front of them, even though, again, it will be obviously in a little different manner. Communication, again, I encourage you to take a look at both the ministry website, lots of good stuff there, our Langley School District website, and again, we will continue we're trying on a weekly basis right now to put something also to students, to staff and to parents. And some of that is just, again, applauding the great efforts of everyone through this process, but also as things change on a day-to-day basis to kind of keep that as a platform to keep people informed. And I'll also comment briefly on you've heard last night anything in events of 50 plus right through the summer are going to be off the table, not going to happen. So this is impacting obviously all that you can imagine, our evening of inspiration events. We had different awards and all kinds of different things we tried to do over the course of May and June. They're all off. You're not going to see in terms of the grad banquet for sure. That those already hotels and places are saying absolutely can't accommodate that. They won't take place. I know that our administrators are getting messages out to their families tonight and over the next few days. I mean, the disappointment for grads is huge. I mean, how many kids look forward to getting dressed up, and it's a big kind of way to celebrate and cap off their education. And I know people are disappointed, and it's not something any of us control. It is what it is. The grad ceremony is another one. Is that in the traditional style we've done that? Will it occur for June? There's no chance. Will there be something do we have an option we could postpone? We could see if things get better by end of August. I'm feeling in my stomach that's a bit of a long shot, to be honest with you. But there's something people are doing. There's other things people look at saying, hey, can we try? There's people putting out things like virtual grads. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not really in terms of enthralled with that approach right now, but I'm always willing to learn more. There's other ways people try to recognize grads, or can they hold the grad in a different manner that allows physical distancing, but you maybe split the grads in half in terms of sizes and be able to do them in large venues and meet those expectations. What I'm letting parents know that our staffs are still wrestling with that one. And while the grad banquet is certainly off the table, a ceremony or something that can acknowledge grads is something that we will continue to wrestle with over the next 2 to 3 weeks and see if we can come up with something that could work. And that, again, does not undermine, again, the provincial health officer. And the other one, summer session. We will also, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, try to make a decision there. This is something I think a number of families would love to see happen if they can access it in July and August. But if these same restrictions are in place, it would be very difficult, because we've had a massive grade 1 to grade 9 program that has had probably about 2,500 kids to 3,000 students. And then we've had over another 1,000 in terms of the grade 10, 11, 12. So this summer, where people aren't going to be traveling, don't have a lot of money, and kids that have been home for 3 months, I'm sure they've been looking for things, but we're going to have to really see what that could potentially look like in terms of being able to support families. So more to follow there as we go ahead. And what I'm going to do now is just have, on a district level, speak specifically to some of the great things that are happening in each of these 4 bullets. We have the health and safety, supporting essential service workers and families, supporting vulnerable families and students, and also the continuity of learning piece. And we have a bit of a quarterback, a person heading that up on each one of these. And what I'll start with is Barry Bunyan, if you would be able to provide, again, some information on the health and safety piece.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Yes, this has been an interesting journey for us as we're trying to and have been working on for a number of weeks, putting processes in place that provides a safe environment for all of our students that are at hubs and all of our staff that it's in our building, and providing that kind of those kinds of procedures that we've never actually seen or worked with before. So this is evolved a bit over time, but I'm happy to say that we could say with confidence that all of our school sites are safe. We do have staff working in all of our buildings. There's administration, in many cases clerical. We have custodians, tradespeople, and also there are teaching staff and support staff in and out of buildings all the time. And we've managed to put things in place to ensure people's safety. We've embarked on a wonderful journey of signage, where, especially with the support of people like Joe Abshar, we have created a number of different signs that reminds people about washing your hands, proper hand washing techniques, different things around what was called social distancing, and now we're referring to as physical distancing. So schools have many signs posted everywhere to remind people of the different kinds of procedures and the different kinds of processes that we would ask them to do while they access the building. A very significant development that we implemented in all of our school sites has to do with how we access our buildings. Buildings can only be accessed through the main doors, so we have an ability to control the traffic that goes in and out. And our the doors of all the buildings also have door monitors and attendants. So if you go to one of our schools and you needed access for something, a door monitor would ask you a series of questions, such as, do you have the symptoms of COVID-19? Have you been out of the country? A couple of questions like that. If they answer yes to any, they won't be permitted into the building. If they answer no, then they will be allowed in. There's a sign-in procedure. And then we have other staff that act as attendants that actually walk with them to the parts of the school that they need access to, whether it's a locker or a classroom or something like that. And the purpose of that is so that the attendant can make note of the parts of the building that have been accessed. We have altered all of our custodial staff, so we have both day and evening custodians, and the information about the access to the building is transferred to the custodians so they can pay special attention to the touch surfaces that in those areas where people have been to make sure they get the attention that they need. And I really want to thank, we have a number of our staff that have been redeployed from their normal work to take on these responsibilities. Many of our bus drivers, many of our crosswalk supervisors, we have some library techs, all sorts of different people that have been redeployed out to schools to help support that. So with all that in place, with physical distancing and our learning hubs, we're learning different ways to support the staff and the students that are in these buildings providing safety. We're developing guides and different rules, and we're also working closely with BCPC and with WorkSafe. And WorkSafe and BCPC are especially important when we come to the fact that a number of our staff, especially teachers and a number of our SEAs and others, are working from home. Working from home is possible, obviously, in this time for a lot of our staff, but there are some things they have to keep in mind around, what do they do when they're at home? When are they available? There are some WorkSafe considerations to make sure that if anything happens that they're covered appropriately. So we've been working through all of those as well. A very common question I get from people is about our supplies, how well supplied we are. Very happy to say we actually have hand sanitizer in all of our schools, at least for now. And we are working on keeping that stocked up. We have lots and lots of soap, lots and lots of disinfectant and cleaning solutions that we use. We're actually very well stocked up until the summertime at least. If we start having greater numbers of people into the school, we'll have to see how those stocks are, but we're on top of that. And our custodial staff and supervisors and managers have done an excellent job of keeping us all well stocked. So it continues. We continue to develop procedures all the time upon recommendation from Fraser Health and from the government and the Ministry of Health, and we adapt and move those forward so that we can be really confident that our buildings are safe when people access it.
Thanks, Barry. And I lived that myself personally today. At each site, I was warmly greeted by support staff as they signed me in. They made sure I used the hand sanitizer. They tracked my every move to make sure that those areas would be clean. And spirits were great. And I talked to all the staff, many of the staff there, and I said, "How are you feeling about working in this environment?" They said very safe, and they said they were getting really a lot of joy out of being able not only to help the kids, but knowing they're making a difference to these families. So well done for the team there. And I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill in terms of our families.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. I just want to start by acknowledging the work that our staff has done. I think about the work that's been done in just over 3 weeks, and I'm actually quite amazed at where we've come to, especially when we think about the fact that we didn't have any plans at all to get to where we've gotten to at the beginning of spring break. So kudos to everybody. And certainly want to start by acknowledging just the number of staff that are involved in our essential service worker hubs. We currently have 5 hubs in operation, and each of those hubs are located in, we've got Fort Langley, where the principal there is Colleen Harvey, Gordon Greenwood, Clint Jackson is the principal, James Hill. We have Kendra Seminato and Lisa Lanchberry at James Kennedy, and then Karen Crozier at Uplands. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Kim Anderson, who is working as the support, who's coordinating the 5 hubs as well. Those 6 individuals started working at the end of spring break, just to get things up and running, put in countless hours in prepping the building, prepping operations and procedures to ensure that the students and the staff that took part were feeling safe and feeling welcome at the same time in the building. So kudos to them and the work that they've done. I also would like to acknowledge we have over 70 staff that are working to support, and some of those have already been mentioned, but certainly our support staff, our school custodians, Superintendent Stewart mentioned the work that they're doing, and our teachers that are there as well. We have 10 teachers, 2 in each of the hubs as well. We started on April 6th with 27 students, and we've been growing ever since. We're up to 95 students serving 54 families that are registered, and they'll be ready to go. The 54 families are counting on us for support. They'll be already in each of those hubs. And so again, it's been a great service. Over the weeks, we keep getting a trickle in of more and more of our essential service workers who are hearing about the hubs through their colleagues. And hearing about the safety that's certainly been presented and organized in the buildings, and as well as the activities that are there for the kids. Really, again, the staff has been amazing at creating fantastic opportunities, not just for fun and physical activity, but for learning as well. I can think of an example of a teacher of one of our students who's in one of the hubs doing a math game through Teams. Just an amazing opportunity for the student to connect with the teacher and spend some time learning with the teacher as well. Again, we continue to work together, and some things that we need to keep in mind as we keep going forward. Talked about the kind of the army of staff that we require. We continue to monitor that staffing, and we continue to work with that staffing as we may look to change the model or maybe even replicate the model in more schools. As we get to 95 students, we know that the hubs probably can't take too many more with that current model. We may have to look at maybe opening up more. In addition, we're looking at monitoring our student attendance as well. We find that with shift work, we have students coming in at different times. So we have more use on certain days than others. We're trying to ensure that we have at least a week ahead planned, and so that we know exactly who's coming and when, and we continue to work through that. Our current considerations, we're looking at continuing to serve our Tier 1, but as Superintendent Stewart has already talked about, that there's the next stage that perhaps could happen in a few weeks, and in between looking at some of our vulnerable learners and what we can do to support those students, and working with Michael Morgan and his team that continues to work with our vulnerable learners in our community, and seeing how we can connect with them and work with them in our schools and beyond, utilizing other agencies. So we continue to work together and looking at good things. And if you have the opportunity and you can get past the person at the door, I would recommend you have the opportunity to go as a trustee, go visit one of our hubs. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. And for the supporting vulnerable families and students, Mike Morgan, Director of Learning Support Services, with us tonight. I said I could cover his material. And there's really 3 different levels to this. There's the schools supporting families, and we do have a vulnerable learner support team at every single site, which is an important team of people working to make sure that we can identify these families. And again, not everybody, again, has internet. We've been working on making sure people get that. Email, phones, being able to contact people where that hasn't happened, being able to find other ways to do this. And again, there's an incredible team of people at every school that are addressing this. There's also district staff and the School District Foundation, which has done an amazing job right now, feeding over 600 students weekly, and through gift cards of $50 or more to those that need it within their families. So again, that's a big help there. Really appreciate how many in the community have sent support to the foundation in order to do this. And then we also have our schools just working with not only the district, but they're also working with the greater community and Inclusion, Langley, and Encompass, and many others. They're all, again, working with, we have Aya Hayer, one of the people working directly with them within Mike's department. She's worked typically within Children in Care, Vice Principal, trying to coordinate all those supports so we're not tripping over each other, can make sure that we can maximize the benefits to kids. One thing people have to keep in mind too is that when we look at when we talk vulnerable, that's not just designated students. There are a number of students without a designation that have all kinds of circumstances, whether at home or also kind of other circumstances in terms of their learning that make them vulnerable. And that's again, it's a significant group of people to help support. Then move to the next slide, Woody. Again, so we started off with what was their primary goal to start, identifying families with food and housing insecurities. And sadly, we have people that, again, during these times are finding it difficult in terms of even meeting that need. They're not going to be focusing on learning when you're trying to address that. We get that. We want to try to make sure basic needs are met before we move on. And we also know that there's a number of families out there that, quite frankly, need respite. That they are having a difficult time, not only on the learning side, but their own exhaustion in terms of, needing the school to work alongside of them to be able to help with that. And I know Mike and his team starting next week are trying to find ways to do a blend, probably working with our community agencies and ourselves to assist those families as we work down those various levels to make sure we can support as many as possible. And on that note, I will then turn it to our final section, and that will be our Assistant Superintendent Woody Bradford to talk about the continuity of learning plan.
Thank you, Superintendent Stewart. Well, it certainly has been a huge shift in terms of what we've been doing around learning within our schools over the last few weeks, and started during spring break in terms of what we were trying to do to transform learning from the classroom to a remote setting. And certainly the undertaking of this has fallen on the shoulders of our Director of Instruction, Dawn Tomlinson. She has done an amazing job with a team that she has around her to support the work that's going on in the field. Leading leaders is going throughout each of our schools right now as people take what they do in their classrooms and move it to a remote setting. So a huge thank you to our instructional services team as they've led this learning and taken a massive amount of work over a short period of time and transformed it into success for our students. And we started after spring break, making sure that we took the time to just make sure that we had all the planning in place for this to be successful. So taking the environment from our classrooms and putting it in a remote setting. So our teachers began to work collaboratively together through different frameworks. And John Thomason, our Director of Instruction, talked about the frameworks being built on the 5 C's: care, compassion, connection, communication, and community. And we really wanted to start off the first week with connection with our students and our families, making sure that we reached out to everyone to see how they were doing, see what sort of things they needed to be successful as we shifted into a remote learning setting. And obviously, in terms of where all our families are, there was different needs that we needed to address to ensure that they felt supported on this journey. And our staff has done a tremendous job. Our support staff, our teachers, our principals and vice principals, our stakeholders who are listening tonight, just everyone together has collaboratively worked on making sure that connection was strong. And one of the things we do really well in Langley is the relationships we have with each other and the importance that we hold in making sure that relationship is maintained and sustained over a long period of time. So the connection was really, really important for us to make sure our students knew that we are going to continue to support them through this new learning. And again, a huge shout out to our grade 12s as they go through this journey, and definitely a different grade 12 year for them. And our thoughts are with them as they work through these different processes in a remote setting over the next few months. Certainly, our teachers have been working on different planning templates, exemplar ideas of teaching and learning in a remote setting, and really built some guidelines around what we're looking for in a remote setting: digital citizenship, social media guidelines, video conferencing guidelines, all the things to make sure that the classrooms, now they're in a remote learning setting, are done in a way that reflects the values we have as a district, and making sure the supports are in place. And what we've found is, as we've developed the different planning templates and showcased the different exemplars, our district has continued to transform in terms of the collaboration that's happening across each of our schools. Normally in our schools, our teachers work really well together and our support staff work really well together in our schools. And then when we transform to a remote setting, what we've seen happen is that all our teachers across the district are connecting with each other outside of our schools, and leaders in each one of our buildings are making sure that the supports are in place, not only for their classroom, not only for their school, but also everyone across the district. And a huge thank you to our parents. Our parents have been on this journey with us around the continuity of learning, and have been we've been sharing with them lots of content and lots of resources in how we can support what's going on at home. And so there's been a lot of learning going on with their families at home of how they support their children along this journey. So again, a huge thank you to them, as we've been delivering lots of resources and content for them. And then our students, as we moved last week, the beginning of last week, moved the whole district to remote learning platforms, specifically 2 platforms that we are focused on. And the feedback we've got from our staff and our parents is that it's great to see us go with 2 platforms instead of having multiple platforms. We've set up 2 platforms, driving through My Blueprint, K-7, and then 8 to 12 using Teams. And we've also, in our K-7 grades, we've also seen Teams being used as well. So those 2 platforms are really the drivers for student learning, and we're taking the learning outcomes we have for the remainder of the year, and then we're putting in the remote setting, and now beginning what the learning looks like in each of those different areas of the curriculum. For the assessment and reporting piece, we continue to follow the reporting order and making sure that our secondary students are still, the learning is still continuing. You're still going to get the marks in each of those courses that you're taking, and those will be again in the final grades that you're receiving. And all K-7, same sort of thing. We're going through every process to make sure your final report has all the grades from all the terms throughout the year to be reported on. And in 3rd term, specifically K-7, we're focusing on literacy and numeracy and a self-reflection on the core competencies, and also making sure, again, 8 to 12, that we're focusing on all those subject areas that you were currently taking before spring break. So again, a huge thank you to terms of what we're doing around the continuity of learning, everyone that's contributing to it. With the collaboration piece, something that has been very exciting is that through the Teams platform, we've created 3 streams that have been working, the TCS platforms, where these teams that are going on are actively engaged with all the teachers from across our district that are contributing ideas and questions and thoughts about how we move to a remote learning setting. And our instructional services team are moderating these conversations, and it's continuous, the amount of information that people are sharing with each other. And it's a professional learning network that has expanded the whole district in terms of what we're doing. And through the channels of Microsoft Teams, My Blueprint, the continuity of learning, and many more channels, we're seeing ideas being created that, again, is transforming what we're doing so that learning can continue. So again, a huge thank you to everyone and the contributions that people are doing. It's really showcasing, again, when we think about our core values, the word excellence, community, integrity, and courage, those are being showcased through the work that our instructional services team is doing, and all our educators in the field are doing to support our families and our students with remote learning.
So thanks, Woody. And just to add quickly, there is also, I'd have to make sure I acknowledge Richard Iskander, his work with, he's the director of IT, and his team have worked tirelessly to make sure that all of the staff have the devices they need, because obviously that's really important, but also to families. This last week, we've been making sure that for families that don't have access or that need additional access have been able to get devices through their schools. And that's huge, because it takes a lot of work to set those things up properly before they're dispersed. It's also been working with 76 families that don't have any access to internet to make sure that that's provided for them going forward. And again, there will be no cost to those families that are facing that. So, there's just a ton there. And again, you don't have remote learning if you don't have the infrastructure. So good for him and for everybody else. And at that point, lengthy, I'm sorry about that. Just a lot of, you can just imagine the sheer volume of information that we've had to wade through over the last little while to make this happen, and certainly wanted to make sure we gave trustees and also our public as much as possible tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm just going to switch who's in the queue here. So we do have a number of questions, and I'm going to start off the list, but I do know that we have a comment from Trustee Ross that he just wanted to say kudos to all the education leaders and admin and the work that they've been doing, that there's been so many hours put in. And then the next question is Trustee Coburn. So I'm going to move myself out of the queue and move Trustee Coburn in to ask her question, and then I will move you back in, Superintendent. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
You're live.
Thank you, Chair Dykeman. First, I just want to acknowledge the terrible events that unfolded in Nova Scotia over the weekend. I just thought it would be important for us just to kind of bear that in the back of our minds as we go through what we consider challenges and problems. And that my heart goes out to the families and to all Canadians. The second thing I'd like to say is to the staff, all of the staff in this district, you guys are amazing. You just really are knocking it out of the park. So here's my question, and it has to do with Gord, Superintendent's slide, provincial equity. So I have a question regarding this, and it's a two-part question. So the first one, when we talk about equity, I'm specifically concerned about the grade 12 students, and as universities are going online in September, they're already online and they're already set up. Many of our grade 12s, and not unlike any kids in the province, will be headed off to university. My concern is that learning Calculus 12 online is a far cry from being in a classroom, and your grade from A could go to C- very quickly. So I'm wondering if the ministry has had any discussion of taking grades out of this and just giving a simple pass or fail, as every kid in the province would be on the same, on the receiving end of the same issue, and then that would promote equality. So during unprecedented times, we're not looking at grades, we're looking at pass or fail. So that's my first question. And then the second one, when we talk about equity, from where I'm sitting so far, it seems that this all seems to be falling on teachers and staff and parents and kids. And I'm just wondering where the government is in all of this and what they've been doing to support us as we've been implementing their directives, whether this is with policy or with money. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Coburn, as we get used to utilizing this platform. Thanks for your acknowledgement of the folks in Nova Scotia too. Absolutely horrendous things that happen back there. And again, they need all the support that they can get during this time. So thank you for acknowledging that. The provincial equity, good questions as always. Yeah, the grade 12s. Yeah, this is, has there been any discussion in the pass fail? That's off the table. They've asked us for the end of this week to put in a letter grade and percent for every course, even where kids are under a semestered system. It was no choice, must have that in. That would be used for the post-secondaries. That being said, they did say that the post-secondaries recognize that this is a very, very unique time. How much weight they're going to put into this versus trying to find, they've been all of the post-secondaries have been looking for other artifacts that they can bring in terms of being able to determine child's strengths as they go forward. So I do think you're going to see probably more leeway than you've ever seen before there. But I know that one of the thoughts they talked about, certainly students transitioning back, they've talked about two groups. One, K to 3, because of the impact they feel that they're least at risk, they believe. But the other was grade 12s. And could we not, even with grade 12s, not that all kids could use it, but particularly, I would have been one struggling with that calculus myself. I would have been one, I would love to get into that classroom, and even could I get some one-on-one or maybe a small group of 3 or 4. That is why I think they're looking at that group also to say, even if we could get them in for 6-7 weeks, that might make a tremendous difference. And so I'm hopeful of that going forward, because your points are right, well taken there. Financially, the support, not yet. Not that, and we can have our Secretary Treasurer speak to that. I think what we're really worried about right now is that we are going to face probably the most challenging budget you've faced and that I faced in my role, or Brian. The international student piece is certainly being impacted, and that is going to have a dramatic impact on everyone in the Lower Mainland. And also the way housing is right now, if the housing sales do not go in the way that they've trended in the past, our projections, we may not meet them. Should those two things not happen, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult spot for the fall. So I guess where we will be advocating, and have already started that underway, and we'll probably lean to our trustees to support us in this, is that we're saying, hey, if there are any savings from this year, we will need those to help us kind of get through next year. And I know our Secretary Treasurer does a fantastic job advocating there and has already started that process underway. Because again, that is something that of a great concern to me right now. But thank you for your questions.
So thank you, Superintendent. Now, Trustee Perot has 2 questions she put in the chat, and then I will get her to indicate if she wants me to set her into the queue after these questions are asked. So the first one is, what are the risks with staggering and alternating days with staff that are immune compromised or students? And we heard that there are cleaning supplies, but some concerns in the future. What is that looking like? And then the second one is, how is our students with IEPs and SEA supports for student community who really need these supports being provided, and what does that look like?
So thank you, Trustee Perot. So I'm going to have our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Barry Bunyan, speak to the issues around immune compromised staff. If you wouldn't mind, Barry, possibly weighing in, and then I can talk a little bit about the IEPs and SCA piece.
Yes, of course, Superintendent Stewart. So we work really carefully and really closely with Fraser Health on taking clear recommendations from them and communicating with them regularly on what procedures need to be set up in place in our schools in order to support everybody, people who have immune compromised conditions as well as people who don't. And that's what we are implementing and will continue to implement. If we start going through any kind of process where we're staggering students or alternating days or different kinds of things that we might be entering into in the upcoming weeks or months, we'll obviously be taking our lead from Fraser Health and from the Ministry of Health on the right guidelines in place. So what we're being told, and what we have been told consistently from day one, is that if these procedures, the washing the hands, the sanitizing, the monitors, the attendance, the signage, the custodial awareness, all of that, if that is in place and maintained, then that is result is a school that is safe for anybody to come into access, as long as the access, of course, is monitored and is done carefully. So we're very confident that those procedures are in place. And of course, if we move to having more staff in the school, we'll adjust to that going forward.
Thanks, Barry. And in terms of the second part of the question with IEP, so our resource teachers right now with their caseloads, that's what they've been working extensively through, making sure they've contacted families. Our support staff, our SAs, have been fantastic there. Many of them, again, working from home, making contacts in alignment with the resource teacher. We do have SAs also working with the students that also have IEPs in our terms of our hubs. They've been working alongside them, and I believe what the hope is that should we be able to transition more kids in, that SAs will be able to provide some of that small group support or one-on-one support, still in a safe manner, and they play a critical role now, and they'll continue to during this process.
Trustee Perot, on follow-up, was wondering, are we able to maintain that level of procedure for safety with the supplies at hand?
So yes, we feel confident that we can. We're procuring supplies all the time, and we're excellent at being proactive to get the right amount in the school. We are very well stocked right now. So even if we were to increase the number of individuals in our buildings, we are going to be really good for certainly the near future or weeks as we build up more supplies.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I am now going to slide Vice Chair Todd into the queue. He has a question. Moving over slowly. Okay, there you go. You're on live.
Thank you. Thank you. Superintendent Stewart, I just also wanted to acknowledge that how all our employees have just taken, you know, from your leadership all the way down. And I know that during spring break, our administrators were working super hard to get everything. And when we talk about continuity of learning, the 5 C's, it starts there. And I appreciate that we start with caring. And that's kind of where it's not even so a question I have, but it's more a concern, harkening back to Trustee Coburn's question about equity and the equity piece. And as we transition from the learning to the assessment, I'm just concerned, and parents probably are as well too, that when we talk assessment and we don't have equal access to Wi-Fi, we don't have the tech components, we don't have all those things, and then we're talking assessment, and I'm not sure right now if we're going to be able to just tease away whether it's authentic assessment, especially at this time. You know, sometimes are we grading parents' ability to teach online, you know, or support their child in this journey? And that's my piece. Like, I really like the pass-fail piece because it addresses some of those concerns. So maybe your comments and just it's coming from a place of concern.
Yeah, so good. So thank you, Trustee Todd, and alongside with Trustee Coburn raising it. Those are that is the wrestle in terms of because how many of our staff, and this is new in terms of also as a platform to work through. We're trying to key on a couple of things to make this, I guess, a little bit more manageable for parents and ourselves. K-7, the focus is going to be numeracy literacy. Like that's going to be the focus. Let's, you know what, we've done up till spring break, great with other areas, but those are going to be 2 that we'll zero in on and to do the best we can to kind of manage those. Certainly, I believe that we also have, there's always been an element of discretion. Teachers are professionals and they do sit down and they look at individual case studies. And I think where people see a significant tail off, they do what they can to read that in terms of the assessment piece. It's not, I've always encouraged people to don't make it strictly mathematical to the decimal because quite frankly, that could be challenged on many fronts. And I do think you have to look at the circumstances kids are in. I think you have to look at in terms of the ability of teachers to be able to kind of work alongside those families that you're right, have different abilities and all these different areas. And I would love for, again, what I'm really quite concerned on the inequity piece is the ones that are most vulnerable fall further behind in these types of times. And they will, unless we can find some way to, again, if we don't get to a blended model of some sort, I'm as equally concerned as all of you, but we are trying to, we will be working through Don Tomlinson and through Woody Mel also, and Mike Morgan, to say to folks, again, these are different times, recognize it. You've had a chance to see a student for, in some cases, under a linear system a little bit longer, obviously. What are some of the things that have helped inform you for that last piece than simply judging someone on the last couple of months, which would obviously be pretty tough. So, well, good points taken, and we got certainly some work to do, not only locally, but provincially on that level.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Now, Trustee Ward had a question. I'm going to let him ask it because I'm not sure that I fully understand the question. So I'm just going to send Trustee Ward live.
Thank you, Chair, and to Superintendent Stewart. Yeah, I maybe don't even understand the question myself. No, my question is about wholesale grade repetition and whether there's any concern or any idea out there to whether some people or entire groups or years will need to repeat the whole year and then just kind of take on next year as if it were this year.
So thank you, Trustee Ward. Yeah, that certainly as we look to the fall, I mean, again, what if this is still the situation for the fall? So if that's the case, you know what, you worry about between September and also December, not only just the catching up, but you're still in this kind of environment that we've already said can be quite problematic. So there's going to be an element of that, no question. Whenever we return to whatever the new normal is going to be after this, there will be certainly gaps. that will have to be addressed. And I think what we have to make sure, we've always said in terms of the core competencies, if you have those, and again, you're numerate, literate, the core competencies in terms of being able to be critical thinkers and be able to communicate well and be creative thinkers, like I think we have to also, we have to put our focus to certain things and say, hey, we got to make sure kids get these, because we know if they have these particular skills, they'll be successful for whatever they do in life. And so what are we going to have to try to do, and maybe focusing predominantly on a few areas versus many, just because of to the points you're raising. But an element of catching up for the past, yes, and the longer this goes, you can imagine the more difficult it's going to be to try to recapture that. But good point.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. So I have a couple questions from Trustee Ross, and then I have 2 speakers on the second time speaker list. So if you have not asked a question and you'd like to be after Trustee Ross's questions here, then please indicate so. Otherwise, I'll move to the second time speakers list. Okay, so I have 3 questions from Trustee Ross in the chat. So the first one is if we could get a little bit of a glimpse of what staffing is looking like for next year. The second one is, say a family didn't have a computer, how would we as a district be supporting them? And then the third question was, just going down here, is the UConnect model something that's being used as a template? Not sure. I'm going to go to Superintendent first, and then he can direct as he chooses those 3 questions.
Okay, so on the staffing front right now, that's a process we're still just going through in terms of schools have just got their budgets. So they're taking a look at that process right now. So probably have a better ability to answer that in probably the next, probably by middle of May, because that's when I have to do a surplusing process by then. One of the difficulties is we're operating a little bit in the dark about what are we going to have financially for next year based on the issues I've already raised, and our Secretary Treasurer has been put in an awkward situation of trying to guess that out the best you can. You want to be, somewhat conservative, because you don't want to put yourself in a $5 million deficit going into next year either. So we have put certainly we certainly put some tighter in terms of restrictions around the budget for going into next year. You can imagine we've reduced all the totals on ISP in terms of our secondary schools. So that's certainly having an impact there, because there will be fewer numbers. So by virtue of that, there will be staff that is there plenty of work. It may not necessarily be in that same building or in the same things they traditionally taught. That could certainly be an impact at secondary for sure. But we're just started that process. And again, we'd be able to give you an update probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks. In terms of the access to technology, we've again, through the secondary, laptops for secondary students and iPads for elementary students. For anyone that does not have those, we've provided them. So they've gone through that process of coming into schools and signing those out, a process to do that. And we do know with some larger families, we've also known that that's sometimes meant more than one. And there's also some families that have one and have asked for something else, because if you have 2 or 3 kids or 4 kids in the house, you have to be conscious of that too. And again, great work that's been done there by the department. UConnect, do we learn from them, and also our Langley Education Center? Both they're very familiar with this type of learning, and they have been providing, Paul Trattle and Ron Stair in particular, as principals of both those places, have been doing a ton to provide professional development and support as we've gone down this road, and we've been very thankful for their help.
Thank you for answering those questions, Superintendent. So we have, as far as I can tell from the chat, exhausted the first time speakers list. So I have 2 speakers on the second time speakers list. The first one is Trustee Coburn, and the second one will be Trustee Perot. So I'm going to send Trustee Coburn into the queue. Now live, you're ready to go, and then I will slide Trustee Perot in next.
So my question, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Nope.
We can for sure hear you. No, you need to unmute. Unmute.
Can you hear
were
me
unmuted. Now we can hear you.
It's telling me that I'm muted. Okay. So to the superintendent through the chair, first I want to acknowledge the tight time frame that you've all been on. And I know firsthand that you didn't take a spring break. Nobody did. So You've been going nonstop. And so my question isn't one of like criticism, it's just curiosity, right? So the government says we are all working from home, like as if that's the only thing we're trying to do. Really, we're surviving a pandemic while we're trying to hold on to our jobs and take care of our kids and not pull our hair out. So parents and teachers, you don't have any. Parents and teachers are already overwhelmed by the sheer amount of time they have to spend online because of their careers and because of everything that's gone online. And same as our staff, because now their whole job's been transferred online. So I'm just wondering if there's any talk of putting parameters in place of when you get emails from teachers and principals. So, and this goes both ways. This is self-care for both our staff and our families. So parent has done their job all day online, then they're teaching kids online, and then they're online applying for benefits, and then it's midnight and they get an email from their teacher because that's what the teacher works. I'm getting emails on Saturdays and Sundays. So I'm just wondering if there's been any talk about how we protect our people and our families from burnout. Because when you work from home, there's this presupposition that you're not doing anything. So thank you.
No, thanks, Trustee Coburn. Yeah, great points. Is worried about burning out for sure. That's everyone, and a couple of things we've been trying to do. One, educate our teachers in terms of the amount of work that is manageable for students, and these are new times, so you don't want to kind of blitz them with too much stuff, particularly if it's secondary of 6, 7, or 8 subjects, having them all kind of unload these at the same time. And even for rate K to 12, how do you kind of make it manageable knowing this is new territory? So we have been setting those out to staff to say these are kind of some guidelines you need to certainly follow there. Gail Markin's been doing work for twofold with our staff and also for parents. So she's providing links to something that she's kind of streaming out once a week in terms of tips around wellness and our own mental, physical, and emotional well-being through this, which is great. We've got one going on to, I think, tomorrow for staff. And again, but I know that Joe's been kicking that out also for parents. Also, I think we could all use that because these are, to your point, it's not just about that. There is a pandemic. There's lots of anxiety going forward. And I think what we've tried to do through administrators on down is say, can you try to protect those weekends? You know, can you try to kind of find those times to sit down, dinner with the families, those types of things? I do know that it's interesting. A number of teachers have commented they've been working at home. And, you know, I think somebody will say, you're working at home. That must be good, putting in 3 or 4 hours. Many are putting in 8 or 10 or more because there's so much to learn around this. And they're kind of going, man, I've never worked harder in my life. So we have to be conscious of that too. So yeah, certainly through instructional services, we're doing what we can with staff, and certainly through website and other resources for parents going forward, because yeah, they've got to make it manageable. And I can tell you, I looked around at the staff here about a week after spring break, and I thought, oh my goodness, that was supposed to be the spring break, and everybody looked absolutely exhausted. I thought, okay, we better be careful here. But no, thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. So the last speaker that I have on the list is Trustee Perot. I'm going to slide her into the queue, and then after that, we are going to move a motion to receive this report to move on to the next item. So I will be looking for a mover and seconder to receive the report in the chat. So I'm sending Trustee Perot live into the queue. All right.
Thank you, Chair Dykeman, and thank you, Shelley, for those important thoughts. It's quite critical to where we're going right now, and definitely is a great segue to where I'm going to go with my thoughts, Gord. I'm going back to the IEP question. I'm trying to really wrap my mind around how we are supporting our kids. There's enough communication in social media from our own district as well as across the board that with exactly what Trustee Colburn's speaking of, parents being overwhelmed, staff being overwhelmed, that our kids are not getting the help they need. Parents are actually having mental breakdowns. As a counselor, I'm receiving incredible amount of phone calls and providing an unprecedented amount of support for our parents in these areas in the province. And, you know, we saw a survey go out about 2 weeks ago speaking to the same through BC Ed Access. 209 participants in 34 districts, and 58% said they were not getting support for their IEP. So although I know this is really difficult for every one of us, our educators, for our administrators, our families, and our students, I'm growing increasingly concerned, and I'm thankful to hear that you're equally concerned for our vulnerable Gord, but I think we need some communication going forward to our families or something, because again, going back to what Trustee Colburn was speaking of regarding math, for example, getting a math lesson, doing reverse classrooms online, whatnot, these are great tools, but in the classroom, what's happening is real-time catching 3 or 4 students suddenly struggling on a problem, and we're not catching those experiences, and we're losing some of our kiddos, and mental health issues are being exacerbated right now, and our education's really has no foundation if our foundation of our families aren't sound. And so I really, that's just a big heavy piece of my heart. So I want to hear what we're doing, how we're reaching out directly. It's great we got these people in the schools, but I'm just hearing a steady conversation of I'm not being supported, my kid's melting down, I'm melting down, I need help, or I'm checking out. And when you hear parents say I'm tapping out, that's a really big alarm, especially in the world of families with special needs, for any family, but especially when a parent is already mentally, psychologically, emotionally, and often physically exhausted. That would be great if I can get some better clarity.
Thank you, Trustee Pro. I'm just going to send the superintendent live, and he will answer your question and follow up on that, and then we'll go to our motion. All right, Superintendent.
Well, so thank you for, again, the question, and again, many tonight around the anxiety piece for certain, and trying to make sure we don't overwhelm families that in some cases we're already overwhelmed under the system we had before spring break. So I know that certainly Assistant Superintendent Mel Gill may have some thoughts too. Renge Bailey is someone we lean heavily on for these types of things in terms of supports for kids. We do have some outstanding counselors that I know are working around the clock. We also have said to the community, you can't do it alone. Like there's a number of community agencies that we're reaching out to also to say that that have a whole array. And again, just because my own familiarity with Encompass, I know, for example, for them, they're one that have reached out to say, hey, we've got lots of different things that people can access. So our job is to get that communication to families so they know that, because there's no way we're doing this on our own. Like that's actually not even possible. So I do think, again, this is an opportunity to bring those supports together. I do think on our vulnerable student learners committees at each of the schools, and Mike Morgan, I can certainly bring him forward to a future meeting, who could obviously speak much better to this, but they have done an incredible job. They know who these folks are. They have said the first focus was basic needs, absolutely, but they do know the next step's going to be, okay, when we can meet those, we do have to do, what can we do on that learning piece? And they also know that there's some that, again, whether it's respite or whether it's, again, having, again, that direct one-on-one, and they need it in a physical environment versus an online platform. We're getting there, Suzanne, but it's not there yet. But I'm not surprised given how much has kind of been offloaded in the last 2 to 3 weeks. I'm going to feel much better in the next. Feel better placed to know how that's going next 3 or 4 weeks. But I'd be more than glad also to bring other expertise to the table to address it. And again, Mel, feel free. I don't know if you've had anything to add there on that one.
Yeah, I think the one piece is that, and I think Assistant Superintendent Bradford talked about it as well, is that this is week 1 was communication. Week 2 was really getting a sense of our own learning as staffs. Week 3 is really about the start of the learning journey in this remote world. And certainly we're going to, as we walk through this first week, start to determine who our students are that are struggling. We have our SEAs and our youth care workers and our teachers and our resource teachers all connecting with our students independently, based on their own caseloads, based on conversations that are being had at the school level. We have our school-based teams functioning currently, looking at doing problem solving as well. We've already had many of our schools have already had school-based team meetings as well. We also understand, to Superintendent Stewart's point, that remote learning isn't going to work for all students. We also, I can tell you that at least in one of our secondary schools, we've begun bringing some kids in just a couple at a time to start with, but really the ones that we're really most concerned about, and I believe that those numbers will build over time, just because we feel like there's some students we need to bring into the building to be able to work side by side safely, to ensure that they're getting the supports and instruction that they need, so that there isn't a gap in learning that they need to be successful as well. And I think Superintendent Bradford wanted to add something as well, or Assistant Superintendent Bradford.
Yeah, thank you, Assistant Superintendent Gill. Just echoing the same sort of thing in terms of what's happening on the ground right now in terms of process, and transitioning to the remote learning piece last week. Certainly what we've been doing as we've been doing that work is really connecting with those families to find out what needs are necessary for them to be successful, whatever that need is. And we've taken time and patience to do that. And as we've shared tonight, I hear Mike Pugh, district principals that we have, Carmen Eberly, just working extremely hard on the ground to find out the information from each of these families, what we need to do, and then putting the structures and supports in place. And our support staff have also really contributed to making sure those one-on-one connections are made. And the greatest gift you can give sometimes is just listening to what people have to say, and hearing the needs that people are sharing with us, and then supporting those needs the best possible way we can. And certainly our Director of Learning Support Services, Michael Morgan, has a huge heart for all our kids in our district and our staff, and he's doing an amazing job with his team to gather that information, as Superintendent Stewart said, and really put the supports in place that are necessary for us to be successful going forward. And this is a huge shift in terms of what we've undertaken over the last few weeks with technology and learning working together. And so I think you will see too the power of technology in terms of what it can do to support our learners outside of a brick and mortar or a school, and what it can do in a remote learning setting to support those kids that need those necessary applications to really support their setting, where they are as a learner. So I think over the next few weeks, we'll have more of the situation in terms of drilling down those supports, but it's going to take a little bit of time before we get to every single person to see exactly what they need. But certainly the people working right now are making those connections, those families. I hope those families are feeling heard, because that's the most important thing we wanted to make sure is that we connected with them and they felt heard, and we need to make sure we support them as we go forth.
Thanks, Woody. And I don't know if we've lost Megan here in terms of the feed, but we're still just trying to get back. I just wanted to say good questions, everyone. And it's been a long time since we've been able to get together in any kind of forum to do this, but I am most appreciative of your thoughts around that. I know you're all well connected to communities, and you know what, they expect you to bring their voices to this table. So good job. And obviously it's early days yet. What I think you're hearing tonight is a commitment from staff that we're going to do everything we can to address the concerns that are raised, because we want Langley to make sure that all of our families are well served. But thank you very much for the questions, and I'll see if we can link back up with Megan here. I think she might be back.
I'm back. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. It just completely froze. So I will move myself into the queue and I will go live. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. It just kicked me out. You have to love technology. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so we are on the vote now. So I do have the motion is that the Board of Education receives the superintendent's report on COVID-19 for information as presented. And in the chat, I see that Trustee Coburn has moved the motion, and it has been seconded by Trustee Ross. And so I'm just going to ask if there is anybody who is opposed to this motion. Please state your opposition now. Anybody opposed? Seeing no opposition to this motion, the motion is carried. All right, so we're now on to our next report, which is also our superintendent's report, which is the International Student Program tuition changes. I'm going to slide superintendent back into the queue here.
Yeah, and I don't know, Brian, is this one that you're speaking to or not? I don't have the notes on that one.
I thought you were, but I can if you need me to.
Yeah, I don't think we have a slide on it. I think this was one that we were looking at increasing the fees, not for September, but the following September of 2021. And I believe it was it $1,000, Brian, that those fees would go up?
Yeah, so the proposal, not for, like Superintendent said, not for the next school year, but for the following one, for the year 21-22, raising it $1,000 to $15,500. And that's in line with what other metro districts are doing due to the cost of the MSP changes that had happened with international students. And I believe a couple of districts have even implemented that for this year or even next year. But we wanted to give our agents a year's notice. So that has how we've typically done those proposals. So this is for your information that we are planning on increasing those starting in the 21-22 school year.
And just, Brian, anticipating Trustee Ross's question, I will already answer his question. Will this have an impact on our marketing for the future? Again, I think we're very fortunate that this is not in place for this fall. Our surrounding communities, a couple went with this fall, and that could be more of a challenge for them. Obviously, our hope a year from now, the landscape will be much different. That's our hope. And that's why I think we're well positioned there. And we do like to give at least a year's notice. And if you don't do it now, we'd have to wait even an additional year on top of that. And quite frankly, we're incurring enough cost pressures as it is next year. We can help alleviate some of those in the future. We want to address it. Thank you for your question, Trustee Ross.
All right. So thank you, Superintendent, Secretary, Treasurer. Trustee Ross actually does have another question, and that question would be about a discussion in relation to a discount for returning students. Is that something that is being considered at this point, either Superintendent or Secretary, Treasurer?
Well, I can speak for Brian on this one. No, that's not something that we're looking at this time. Right now, we have 719 that have already confirmed payment for towards next year in terms of returning. So, and quite frankly, in terms of what we provide and in terms of within the cost structure that exists, actually, we are one of the more affordable places in the Lower Mainland to access this opportunity. So that is not something we're entertaining at this point in time.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from trustees on this item? Any other questions? Oh, Trustee Coburn. Oh, sorry. Yes. So we do not have any other questions. And I do have a mover on this motion. And the motion is that the Board of Education receives the report on the International Student Program tuition change for information as presented. And that has been moved by Trustee Todd and seconded by Trustee Perot. Any other further questions or comments on that? Seeing none, is there any opposition to receiving this report? We do not have any opposition that I can see. Last call for any opposition on this matter. Seeing none, the report is received for information. The motion is carried. All right, we are now on to 6.3, which is our school calendars 2021. I believe we are going back over to you, Superintendent. So I'm going to send you live.
Thank you, and I'm going to send this one to our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Barry Bunyan. I believe you were going to walk trustees through the slides.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Stewart. Okay, so if trustees recall, every year in April, we do go through a calendar approval process. Last year, the calendar approval process had two facets to it. One was that the trustees approved a 3-year calendar that identified for this current school year, for 2021 next year, and for 21-22, identified days of instruction, the start of school, the end of school, the winter break, the spring break, and statutory holidays, etc. So that has been approved by trustees. So the other part, the second part that trustees voted on last year, was the specific details that drive our programs and everything in our specific school calendars for this current year. The proposal today is only one set of, there's only one decision for trustees. That's on the specific school calendar details for next year, 2021, because trustees have already passed the general school calendar last year. Okay, next slide, please, Woody. So again, a little background, and this is a little different than what trustees have seen before. Our goal has been for many years, and continues to be, to work with schools to increase the alignment between our school calendars while respecting unique school community needs. In some districts, there's one school calendar for the whole district, and every school has the exact same professional development days and non-instructional days and different things. In Langley, we respect and embrace diversity in our communities, but we also try to keep things in alignment as much as possible so that if parents have children in different schools, there's predictability for their lives and that kind of thing, but that is always a focus. That said, there are 8 school calendars to approve for this year. We have integrated, once again, a 2-week spring break by adding 5 days of classes not in session. That's something that we've done for, I think we're up to close to 10 years now, so that's nothing new. We do have a joint HR-LTA calendar committee, which typically meets yearly to review all proposed calendars and bell schedules prior to presentation to the board. Due to complications with COVID-19, the committee could not formally meet, but the bell schedules and the proposed calendars were shared with the LTA executive prior to tonight's board meeting, and bell schedules were shared around the beginning of March. Proposed bell schedules and proposed calendars were shared towards the end of spring break. Feedback from the community during the district input process always identifies difficulties with early dismissal days and placement of non-instructional days. And I believe Superintendent Stewart alluded even earlier on half days are certainly not everyone's preference. So we try to keep those out. And for this year, we are not having the collaboration early dismissal days as we've had in the past out of respect for that. So our 2-week spring break, again, it goes back many years. We have to capture the 5 extra days that our schools are not in session at spring break by adding 9 minutes per day to all the other days, and that over the course of the entire year captures all the missed time. Spring break then becomes 2 weeks. The additional spring break, week at spring break only affects instructional time at school. School board office staff, maintenance staff, IT staff, and other 12-month employees are not affected because their work is not dependent on whether students are in school or not. QP 1260 and the district have in the past negotiated agreements to balance the loss of an extra week of school with school-based support employees in order for them not to realize any significant loss. Those LOUs have been signed and have been confirmed. That only happened the other day, and that happened after I'd put in this PowerPoint. So that is all in place. So for next school year, we have a certain number of days that we have when you take into account the first day of school is the day after Labor Day, and the last day of school is at the end of June. For next year, there are 185 days in total, and that, of course, that's not including spring break, winter break, and statutory holidays. 178 of those days are instructional, where students are in session. 7 are non-instructional, as we did this year. We have 3 professional days next year, 1 administration day in June, 2 report card design and assessment days, and 1 school improvement day, which next year is proposed to be September 25th. Those 7 days are the same as last year. And there is, if anyone has a question about the calendar variation day that was in place this year, there is no calendar variation day next year. So there is no day when staff have sort of an extra day of not in session. You may know when you look at the calendar that there are a couple of unusual things to make note of. One is that the staff at RC Garnet Elementary does not take their Pro D Day in May, the same time that all the other schools in the district do, and that is because RC Garnet elementary staff do demonstration teaching and lessons. We'll see what form that takes this year in our online learning, but that's typically what they would do on those days. On that day, so they have a Pro D day at a different time so that they can end up with their time for Pro D as well. And Langley Education Center has what would appear to be a bit of an unusual calendar. Just remind trustees that for many years, LEC's calendar is based on a 4-day week, not a 5-day week. So their non-instructional days will be very different because they don't teach on Fridays. So those days are distributed in a different way throughout the year. But please note that if you are comparing calendars last year to this year, there are no significant changes to the LEC calendar for the upcoming year from what was in place this year. So there are 8 calendars. I know that doesn't seem like we're trying to align things if we have 8 calendars, but it is a reflection of the fact that Langley has a long history of choice programs in the district, and because of the different ways our programs are structured and organized, that does require different calendars to be in place. So we do have a calendar for the Aldergrove region that is something for their area. All other elementary and middle schools in the district have a calendar that they adhere to. Secondary schools that are linear have a calendar. Secondary schools that are semester have a calendar. It reflects different report card dates and semester dates. Langley Fine Arts, a K-12 school with elementary, middle, and secondary, has their own calendar, as does Langley Fundamental Middle Secondary, and as I said before, Langley Education Center. And then Simons and UConnect, which is also a wonderful but unique program in our district, have their calendar as well. Those calendars were given to trustees in their packages under Appendix A, and this is not so that you can read it because it's pretty small writing and I think you'd have a hard time, but this just shows you, the structure of the different calendars that are there for trustees to consider. Next slide, please, Woody. And just to make sure everybody is aware that all of the calendars have been checked to make sure that they comply with all relevant school calendar regulations. The Ministry of Education specifically mandates that there's certain hours of instruction for kindergarten students, for elementary students, and for high school students. So when we develop our calendars and we look at the days of instruction, we have to ensure that the amount of instructional time meets those requirements, which they all do. And we also work with the LTA because in the LTA collective agreement, there is specific language that does talk about the start and end and how long a day can be and how long instruction can be. And we do work with them and we do make adjustments with agreement from the LTA to make sure that we meet the ministry regulations and also the collective agreement language. And there, just in time, is the different hours that the ministry mandates. For kindergarten, it's 848. Grades 1 to 7 is 873, and 8 to 12, it's 947. And that's over the course of the entire year. So that's the end of the presentation. So the motion that we recommend for trustees to consider is that you improve the school calendars for the 2020-2021 school year as presented.
Thank you for the wonderful report on the calendars. We appreciate it very much. And I do have one question in the queue right now. And the question is from a trustee Wilson. So I will send her live here. All right. So just there we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to start by saying I am really happy and excited that there's no calendar variation day next year because I know the logistical complications that come with that. So that's something to be happy about. I'm also really happy to see that we have eliminated the half days and shortened days, as I know from many families and staff as well, that these can cause some issues. And I'm wondering if, or if it's too far ahead and we haven't thought of this yet, if we know if now that we've eliminated those half days and shortened days, if there will still be a conflict with bus monitors working as noon hour supervisors, and a bit of a background for other trustees or people, is that we have an issue in the district, or have in the past, filling noon hour supervisor positions because they're only an hour a day, so they're not a huge bonus for people. But the perfect people that would like that job are our bus monitors who work in the morning and after school. But in the past, because of those shortened days and half days, there's been on those days a conflict with them being able to get to their bus route for the afternoon pickup in time. So they have been unable to take those positions. So I just think this would be the perfect opportunity now, because there wouldn't be that conflict. So I'm wondering if we have looked into that, or we still have issues with getting noon hour supervisors in the district, because it's been a while since I've heard about that. So hopefully someone can answer that.
I'm going to send the superintendent live on this. Superintendent, is this something that you're able to answer or at this point?
Okay. Sorry. So no, I can't, but maybe I can see if Barry can, and if not, then for Trustee Wilson, then that's something obviously we can get back to all trustees on. But Barry, I don't know if you have a comment.
Yes, I think I can help, but certainly Trustee Wilson, if it's not sufficient, we're happy to come back. We actually currently do have a few bus monitors that are also noon hour supervisors, because I'm not going to say it's a lot, but we do have some. And with any of our employee groups, whether it's a teacher or support staff or anything, if they're able to do multiple different jobs and combine them together, in order for, but the caveat is always, you know, they have to be able to take a proper lunch, they have to be able to have their breaks, they have to be able to reasonably transport between sites if they're at different sites. It's the same we would have with teachers in different job share arrangements and that kind of too. If that can work out, we can always allow people to take multiple positions, because there's an advantage to everybody to do that. And I think you've correctly identified that when we had early dismissal days and half days, that was more of a challenge than it is now. So I do know we have, I don't have an exact number, but I do know we have some people doing that right now. And as long as it fits with all of those different parameters being addressed, there shouldn't be an issue moving forward.
All right. So now I have my last question. Oh, no, we're good. We don't have any more questions. So the motion before the board right now, the recommended motion, is that the Board of Education approves the school calendars. No, I need to flip the page. So the Board of Education approves the school calendars for the 2021 school year as presented, and I have it moved by Trustee Ward and seconded by Trustee Ross. And I'm just wondering if there's any other speakers to that. I don't see any. So I'm going to ask if there's any opposition. Anyone opposed to this motion? First call. Second call. Anybody opposed to the motion? Okay. Seeing no opposition, the motion is carried. Now we're going to go to the second page, and we're going to go over here to the Secretary Treasurer's reports. And the first one is the annual facilities grant. So I'm going to put the Secretary Treasurer in there because I believe that you do have a PowerPoint on this one. I can't remember.
Not for this one, no.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Dykeman. I just wanted to provide a bit of an update on the annual facilities grant, which is sometimes better known as the AFG. It's a grant that the ministry provides annually for districts to be able to provide maintenance and capital work on some of the minor updates to our facilities. I'd just like to point out that this grant is based on the ministry's fiscal year, which does not align with the school district's fiscal year. It runs from April 1st to March 31st, 2021. So their AFG year has already started a few weeks past. The ministry allocates funds every year from their operating and capital budgets to support these grants. Our grant for the 2021 AFG school year is $3,343,503, which is similar to the amount from last year. The one change that has happened is every year we have to pay for a program called CAMS, which is the Capital Asset Management System. This year, our portion of that is just over 50,000. It's 50,661. That's about $7,000 cheaper than it was last year. So that did add a little bit of funding into our AFG for this year. In your package, you can see the list of some of the projects that have been planned for the funds and requires approval tonight so that we can send that into the ministry to access the funding for these projects. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great. So thank you, Secretary Treasurer. I do not have anybody on the list, so I'll just ask if there are any questions just before. Okay, so with that, seeing no questions, the motion before the board is that the Board of Education approves the annual facilities grant 2020-2021 spending plan as presented. I see a mover in the comments, and it's moved by Vice Chair Todd. And is there a seconder on this motion? Could I please, if you don't want to go in, oh, seconded by Trustee Ross. Any other comments or questions on this motion? Seeing none, restating the question, the motion which has been moved and seconded is that the Board of Education approves the annual facilities grant 2021 spending plan as presented. It's been moved and seconded. Anybody have any opposition to this motion? Anyone opposed to the motion? Third time, anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition to the motion is carried. We're now on to 7.2, which is our annual 5-year capital plan 2020-2021 bylaw. I'm going to put the Secretary Treasurer back in the queue here. Send live. All right, Secretary Treasurer.
Thanks. As the PowerPoint comes up, I just have one slide for the capital plan response. As trustees will recall, every year we are required to submit to the ministry a 5-year capital plan, which is done in June, which the district did this past June. And then in March, the ministry comes and lets us know what items have been either approved or are being advanced to another stage or are asked for project definition reports. So our capital plan letter has arrived, and the slide here shows the projects that have been approved for the district for this upcoming year. Most of them are smaller projects. As you recall, last year we received approval for Brookswood and DW Poppy for the study phases of the window upgrades. Those studies have been completed, so they have now approved the second phase of those. So we will be working through the summer to be replacing some of those windows that have lost their seal at those 2 sites. In addition to that, this year we have been approved for a similar study at Peter Ewart to take a look at their windows and see those that need to be replaced, and we will be submitting a request obviously for the second phase of that in subsequent capital plans. We've also been approved for a accessible playground at Topham Elementary for $125,000. So that is another playground that they are funding from the ministry. We have a building envelope project for Alder Grove Secondary. That one, the scope of that is not completely known. That is one that the ministry runs with BC Housing. So right now they've, since the capital plan letter, have approved us with BC Housing to do the assessment. So they've approved about $47,000 for that study, and further funding will come through recommendations and proposals from BC Housing on that envelope for Aldergrove. There was a follow-up on a couple of project definition reports that had been asked in the previous capital plan, the one being Northeast Latimer, which staff has been working with the ministry on and hopes to submit this summer. And then 3 seismic projects. The short read one should be going into the ministry shortly, and Peter Ewart and Vanguard are still ongoing and being worked on with the engineers and studies, but we hope to get those in just in the fall. So that's our capital plan letter. If there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, so I do have a question from Trustee Ross. So I've just thrown him into the queue. He's going live, just because it's just to make sure that the questions reflected accurately. Trustee Ross, you're live.
Okay, am I okay? Can you hear me? Oh yeah, good. So my question really has to do with sort of long-term need for schools. I don't see any other new schools on the list. Typically that would show up in the capital planning, would it not?
Correct. If they had approved us going to another stage on another school, that would be the case. The Northeast Latimer school is the only other site that we actually physically own. We would need approval for a site before they would give us approval to do a study on a school. So we'd asked for a couple sites in our last capital plan, but none were approved in this one.
So a subsequent question would be then, are you concerned about our future ability to meet the volume of students we're going to have?
Yeah, especially in the Willoughby Slope, it's a rapidly growing area. I was hoping to see a land acquisition in there. We do have Southwest Yorkson coming on site next year, and then we still could have Northeast Latimer come 2 years after that, which would probably address the short term, but beyond that, we definitely need more land and more schools to be built in the coming years.
So just my final response to that is the ministry aware of our future needs, and have they shown any interest in meeting those needs?
They are aware of the demand in the Willoughby Slope. They do come out. We do always take them through that area. They are always constantly surprised as to how much development has happened since the last time they're here, so they are definitely aware.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Roth.
You're muted, Megan.
No, I'm not. Okay, there we go. It's like the chat's going and we're over here. All right, so comments in the chats. We are, obviously trustees are concerned about the fact that we need another school, and losing the momentum that we've been building would be very concerning. And I know that the capital plan isn't the only time we receive an announcement, but as a board, I think we should express some concern to the ministry about the fact that we don't actually have an announcement, the incubator, that we have a school in the capital plan letter, and that we're concerned about that. So that's something, though, that I know that Secretary Treasurer, you've been communicating concerns about the need for schools to continue to be announced when you have your conversations with ministry too, I believe.
Correct.
Yes. All right. Are there any other comments or questions or anything further to add, Secretary Treasurer, on our 5-year capital plan?
I don't have anything further to add. We just need to have the bylaw that was in the package approved. We need this to be able to access the funding for these projects.
Okay, so fellow trustees, we have 4 motions we need to pass tonight. The first 2, which is first and second reading, we'll be able to do in the way that we have in the past over this meeting, which we'll be approving in the negative. The third one will be the motion to have all 3 readings tonight. I will have to roll call that because it must be approved unanimously. So I have already a mover and seconder on first reading. So the first motion before us for our annual 5-year capital plan bylaw is that school district number 35 Langley capital plan 2020-2021 capital bylaw 2020-2021 CPSD 35-01 in the amount of $1,325,000 be given first reading. That is moved by Trustee Coburn, seconded by Vice Chair Todd. Any comments or questions or any other statements on that? Okay, seeing none. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Second call, anybody opposed to the motion? Third and final call for opposition, seeing none, the motion is carried. Second motion tonight will be that School District number 35 Langley, Capital Plan 2020-2021, Capital Bylaw 2020-2021, CPSD 35-01 in the amount of $1,325,000 be given second reading. That one I have moved by Trustee Ross, seconded by Trustee Coburn. Once again, anybody in opposition to the motion? Is there anybody opposed? Second call, anybody opposed? Seeing no opposition to the motion is carried. This one I will roll call all trustees. So that is that the School District number 35 Langley Capital Plan 2020-2021 approves having all three readings of the Capital Plan Bylaw 2020-2021 CPSD 35-01 in the amount of $1,325,000 at tonight's meeting. I have a mover with Trustee Coburn, and I have it seconded by Vice Chair Todd. And I will need to roll call approval of having all three readings tonight. Trustee Wilson, are you in? Do you approve?
Yes, approve.
Trustee Ward? Approved? Okay, Trustee Coburn?
Approved.
Trustee Ross?
Approved.
Vice Chair Todd?
Approved.
Trustee Perot?
Approved.
And I approve. So the motion is carried unanimously. So the final motion this evening is that the School District number 35 Langley Capital Plan 2020-2021 Capital Bylaw number 2020-2021 CPSD 35-01 in the amount of $1,325,000 be given third reading, passed and adopted on this, the 21st day of April 2020. Moved by Trustee Ward, seconded by Vice Chair Todd. Anybody opposed? So once again, in the negative, is there anybody opposed? Third call for opposition, seeing none, the motion is carried. All right, thank you very much. That concludes the Secretary Treasurer's business. I do not see anything under new business. Seeing no new business, we are going to go on to trustee comments. So how we're going to do trustee comments is I'm just going to call them in the order that I see them on my screen. So first up, Trustee Ward, do you have any comments this evening? Oh, I just have to unmute you. Nope, okay. Trustee Ross, any comments tonight?
Well, I just would like to make a comment about, again, I sort of mentioned it in my comments on the side, which the public wouldn't see, but, you know, and having some feedback with some teachers, you know, they have been very appreciative of their senior staff, the principals, etc., that, you know, worked 20 hours a day to facilitate their needs when they got back to school after spring break. So just, you know, it just really speaks to the leadership team that we have in the district. And I really wish I could go around to all these schools and just applaud these people. But here's an opportunity I couldn't miss just to say my personal thanks and to applaud their efforts. So kudos to our principals and vice principals for what they've done over their break. I know our senior staff, amazing schedules as well. My hearts go out to their families and their spouses. They've all sacrificed a lot. So we just, what else can I say but thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Ross. I have now Trustee Coburn. Any comments this evening?
Yeah, I do. Mine are a little more lengthy, so you may want to end with me.
No, that's okay. You're okay. All the time you need.
Okay, so thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. Trustee comments is the portion of our public meeting where we can share our thoughts and our reflections. Where there is no other place to do this, there is here. Tonight I will use my time to share something I've written, and it's a little more lengthy. And because technology is unreliable and can cut out, I have forwarded it to the local media addressed letter to the editor, and I'll also post it on my trusty Facebook. She asks me to kill the spider. Instead, I get the most peaceful weapons I can find. I take a cup, a napkin, I catch the spider, put it outside, and allow it to walk away. If I am ever caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, just being alive, not bothering anyone, I hope I am greeted with the same kind of mercy. Those words by Rudy Francisco are a beautiful sentiment, a lovely thought, a wonderful idea. We should all do our very best to practice it, but so often we don't. There will be times in life where we find ourselves the spider, our fate hanging in the balance, almost entirely dependent on the compassion of others. And there will be other times we are the ones deciding that spider's fate. And these decisions will have profound implications. By the choice and the goodness and the badness of these choices will be determined by what we make in this moment. Will we act with kindness? Do we operate from a place of compassion or courage? Regardless, each decision we make comes with built-in consequences and repercussions, and not just for the spider, but for the spider, if it survives, is also faced with the consequences and has the decisions of their own to make. And here's how I know this to be true. The last time you all saw us here together, I was the spider, and my fate hung in the balance of my colleagues at the table. And tonight I'm getting to take my opportunity to share how this felt, some of the consequences, and how this impacts everyone as we work on moving forward. Now let's go back to our good friend the spider. What will become of it? You see in this, we are confronted with a dilemma, a choice, what to do. The first thing we can do is we can run. The second thing we can do is we could just simply leave it alone and walk away because it really isn't hurting anyone at all. The third choice is we can scoop it up and find a way as humanely as possible to remove it and relocate it because really all it was doing was existing and getting in our way. Or our fourth choice is we can kill it. Problem solved. I guess it depends on what we want and what we are willing to do and at what cost and to whom. So what will we do? It's dependent on a range of factors. Our comfort level with spiders, how badly we want to get into the bathroom, and how much regard we have for the spider. None of this, however, can negate impact or consequences, and these consequences were felt by me. And it can be said that my colleagues at the table were well within the scope of their rights set out to them underneath the School Act. So yes, this act was totally permissible. But this doesn't make it right, because I do not look to the law or policy for my ethics. I do not use them as my moral compass. Morality and ethics come from within, and they cannot be prescribed or forced. This all could have been done so differently, but it wasn't. And some saw, and some were in the room, and many of us felt it. And here we are, and this lies the consequence. This one is all mine. It was humiliating, in case you were wondering. I recovered within minutes. I realized that this was not a reflection of me, because no reason was given. No one spoke to this motion or why I should be removed. The only justification given was the School Act, the magic silver bullet of impunity, but it still hurt like hell. And this brings me to another consequence. I never spoke because I couldn't, because I assure you, I did not see it coming. And what makes this important was no space was created for me to demonstrate any grace. I wasn't able to say thank you, to acknowledge good people. So I'm going to take that time and I'm going to do it now. Thank you. To the partner groups, all of our district people, our families, our littles, thank you. It truly has been my honor and my privilege to serve you in this role, and I wish I could have properly thanked you. I have gained and I have learned, and I have grown so much. I have been given more than I could have ever possibly given. So much of public education is about relationships, and we heard this evening. And because of my time as vice chair, I was able to develop and foster some of the most treasured relationships I will ever have. I work closest with these people at the table and at the district leadership team and their staff, the support staff especially, who have been amazing at accommodating me, and they are oh so prepared. My closest relationships, of course, would be with the ST, the secretary treasurer, and the superintendent. I would like to thank them because this couldn't have been easy on them. On top of your regular jobs, which are demanding, you had to put up with this. Unnecessary hardship when times are tough enough in public education. And to Gord, as vice chair, I was given the rare opportunity to get up close and personal with you, and I have now joined the Gord Stewart fan club. In my journey, as tough as it was, you were always there, caring and compassionate and real. And to my colleagues at the table, thank you. For some, thank you for your confidence in me, your patience, your support, your kindness, and your compassion. You've helped me tremendously, and I have arrived at a place where I am good. And even to those who saw fit to kill a spider at the table, thank you. For without this experience, I would have never learned exactly what it is I'm made of, and just how liked and respected I am in this community. Thank you to all of the folks who reached out, sent flowers, called, showed up, sent cards, messages, texts. You saw an opportunity to act with kindness and compassion, love and integrity. And because of this, the spider knows how good people can be and exactly how much she is loved. Just because you don't like the wrapping doesn't mean it's not a beautiful gift inside. And now you may ask yourself, why is she even doing this? Why is this even important? Why would she bring this up in the middle of a pandemic? First, in the words of the mighty Stevie Nicks, a wound gets worse when treated with neglect. Second, I don't need trusty comments to talk about what's going on. You'll hear what I have to say. And B, most anyone who knows me already knows where I'm going to stand with the way the government is handling this situation. But here's a snippet just in case you don't. Parents aren't employees. They do not take their direction from government. It is going to burden an already existing gap. We are supplanting the work of trained professionals, and the government is saving money and is playing politics. And I can talk about that at another time. Never mind the changes day to day, more like minute to minute, with little to mostly no collaboration or financial support from the provincial government. So I can't really say anything to you except stay strong. And the people in this district are second to none, and I have every confidence that they will do the absolute best they can. But I'm scared that you don't have confidence in us, and I can't blame you. This is a pandemic, and here we are asking you to trust us. And the last time you saw us all together was on the eve of Pink Shirt Day in our Respect and Diversity shirts, and you witnessed a horrendous display of public bullying by adults. And there are consequences. And it hurts people, and not just me. Some of my colleagues at the table were hurt. Even those who were in the room who had to witness it, I was told it was very hard to sit through, and even online, people still can't watch it. It also scares people. It scares staff. Anyone who has ever worked in this setting before understands the implication when a board does something like this. It all trickles down from the top. But more devastating. It calls into question the integrity of the board because although permissible, no reason was given. And here's another consequence. There was no debate. The way the motion was handled, there was no space made for debate. The consequence becomes transparency. What could possibly justify publicly humiliating one of their own colleagues? The public deserves to know, and quite frankly, so do I. And what this means that in the name of transparency and good governance, this has to be brought back to the table. And this is the final consequence. as a result of the decision to remove me and humiliate me publicly, we are now forced to air all of our dirty laundry on this public table. I would expect to see this back at a public meeting to be done properly. The public deserves this because closure is crucial. And there are questions that remain unanswered. And I know I need some. And now, right now, I'm getting it. And I'm thanking you all for your patience in allowing me to speak and giving me the space and time I needed to be heard and to feel safe to come back to this table, to close this and to move on. And when I wake up tomorrow, it will be a new day, and I can't predict what will happen. But I know that this will be closed and that I will move on and do my absolute best to serve this district and work with my colleagues at the table. Be safe, be well, and thank you for your time.
You're muted, Megan.
Thank you for your comments, Trustee Coburn, and thank you for your service as Vice Chair. Next up, I have Trustee Perot. I'm going to move her into the queue.
Thank you, Trustee Coburn, for your comments and for your thoughts and emotions that you shared that are very important, that we understand how you internalized and received what Trustee Ross's motion entailed to you. Before I speak to any of that, most importantly, I want to focus on our district and focus on our staff. I want to thank our support staff. I want to thank our custodians for working so hard during the holidays to ensure that our schools were a safe place for our educators to come back in and try to scramble and address how we can come in safely for our students and make them safe places and put in proper protocols, sacrificing their time. I want to thank our admin team at the district level. Each of you have worked so hard in your commitment to our district, to each other, and to the vision that we are called to selflessly and endlessly and tirelessly, hours upon hours of meetings and learning technology and getting involved in this kind of medium that many of us are very uncomfortable with. So I thank you for that. I want to thank our administrators of our schools and our educators, our Aboriginal workers and our SCAs. It's been an incredible trying time to navigate how to do education. And you guys have done a fabulous job. I also want to acknowledge Langley Secondary School. They're producing through their focus program. They've done a wonderful call out to all of us for their students in that focus program, which is grades 10 to 12. And that program has a focus with students who struggle with anxiety, depression, and different trauma-related issues, and asking us to do a reading of poetry or a favorite book, uplifting article, an essay, and submit a video to support the students. And it's such a profound call out. And I think what a wonderful way to demonstrate their intense care and creativity for our students. I'm going to be doing a reading, and it's going to be on one of my favorite books, Many Color Days by Dr. Seuss, and it's about navigating our emotions and the importance of understanding what our emotions are about and how we get through things. And COVID is a really trying time for all of us, regardless of where we are with our mental health. We have good days, we have bad days, we have many color days. And I want to take that opportunity to be with those students as I'm very passionate about that program. And I want to thank them for their good work. Back to Trustee Coburn. Again, I just want to thank you for your comments. I'm sorry your heart has been hurt. I am confident from my own place of personhood, and I trust the intent behind Trustee Ross's motion. It wasn't an intention to hurt or harm you, and I'm hearing that you were, and so I extend sincere apology to you for having to feel that. And in that, I will be closing my comments.
Thank you, Trustee Perot, for your comments. My next window is Trustee Wilson. Do you have any comments tonight?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'll send you live. All right. All right, there you go, you're live.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So I struggled with whether or not I would address the issue of the blindside that occurred at our last meeting. In light of all that is going on in the world at the moment, it seemed inconsequential. But anyone that knows me knows that I call things out when I think they're wrong. The people that elected me did so because I cannot and will not stand for dishonorable conduct or bullying of any sort. What some trustees did at our last meeting lacked integrity and transparency. Besides the chair not allowing for debate of a motion, which goes against all parliamentary procedure as well as Robert's rules, those who took part in the moving, seconding, and voting for an election broke the cardinal rule of not only trustees, but any board. No surprises. Although I have not been a trustee long, this has been the #1 rule taught at all of our governance sessions and was the unanimous advice given to us from the outgoing trustees of the last board. No surprises. It seems simple enough. Obviously, anyone who has watched an episode of Survivor understands how the rest of the tribe feels when they are blindsided. It makes for some very turbulent times back at camp. And rarely is there a way to repair the damage to the broken trust. Unlike Survivor, there is no need on a public board of education to blindside or publicly humiliate our coworkers. When I decided to enter into politics and become a politician, I thought that the rumors I had heard about politicians was exaggerated. But unfortunately, what I have witnessed in my short time as a politician on this board has shocked me. From a blatant disregard for board policy to trustees secretly recording other trustees' private phone conversations, there is a complete lack of ethics and integrity. I hope that we as trustees can take.
Well, so if there's going to be accusations of trustees apparently making things, those are something that are in camera, and I'm sorry, it's completely out of order. That is not appropriate. So I'm going to ask now that if you are making an accusation like that, that you bring that up in an in-camera meeting. That is not for trustee comments. You can state how you feel about something, but you cannot make accusations of impropriety like that during trustee comments. I'm sorry, that is completely out of order and is inappropriate. So I'm not going to allow conversations of that nature during trustee comments. That is completely inappropriate. So Trustee Wilson, I ask that you please wrap up your comments without making accusations of other trustees.
I can't hear her. Her volume's off.
I don't hear.
No. Okay, sorry, I guess there is a problem here, Trustee Wilson. I'm going to move on to Trustee Todd. I don't have your volume on. I can't hear you, I'm sorry. All right, Trustee Todd.
Sorry, did somebody mute me?
When I spoke, I muted you to ask that you not.
Okay, I'd like to just finish off my comments and thank the district for their service, if you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm not sure if people heard the end of my conversation with, I hope that we as trustees can take time to reflect on our actions and reach out for help such as governance training or training on chairing meetings. The public and district staff deserve better. I'd like to leave off with some well wishes to our students, families, employees, and our entire school district community. We're all trying to navigate these very uncertain times, so please take the advice of Dr. Bonnie Henry and be kind, be calm, and be safe. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Trustee Ross, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
You know, I just wanted to say how wonderful our school district is. You know, as I've met with a few teachers this week, it's just been so powerful just to hear about their commitments to our students and just their heart. And so again, that just comes from the top. So I want to say thank you to the senior team, to our superintendent, Gord Stewart, and just for the love and the leadership that he has taken to our district, and because it's showing up in our classrooms, and I'm really so proud to be in this district. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you.
All right, sorry, Trustee Ross. All right, and now I have down here, boxes have moved. I have Trustee Todd next, and that's the last one for me. Trustee Todd. Trustee Todd, you need to unmute yourself. Trustee Todd, there you go. Oh. Trustee Todd. I'm unmuting here. I'm going to try. You need to unmute yourself. There you go. Now you're unmuted.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So I did want to take this time to thank Trustee Coburn for her time as vice chair. I share many of her similar thoughts around policy and all those things, and she's an asset to any board. On a different note, and I know this personally because my family is impacted by these things, and I just wanted to take this moment to say a loud shout out to our essential workers in Langley Hospital and around the province, because they are doing a tremendous job. And I know that many of their children are in our schools, and we're doing our best we can to accommodate them. But we really, every night at 7 o'clock, I'm banging pots and I'm saying thank you to our frontline workers. And I'm seeing neat chalk paintings all over the place, and just a real appreciation for people who once again are the front line, and they're helping us remain safe. And Dr. Bonnie Henry has already mentioned, be calm, be safe. She's got a following on Facebook. She's a tremendous person and a great leader to carry us through all this. And I really appreciate everything she says to us on a daily basis. I think she's up around 60 briefings at this point. So, and to those families out there, nobody expected this. Nobody signed up for us. And a big thank you to everybody in our district doing the best in uncertain times. Good night.
Thank you, Vice Chair Todd. So I'm going to use my trustee comments to thank our district. I won't be responding to some of the comments made tonight because this is not venue. It's not appropriate. And that any questions like that, individual trustees can raise, and I will not be using trustee comments for that. So with that, I'd like to thank our staff for the incredible amount of work that has been put in over the last number of weeks. Since spring break, this has been quite the ordeal for staff to reassemble and revisit and reestablish what school will look like going forward for our students. My heart just is absolutely breaking for our grade 12 students as we navigate what graduation will look like. families who are struggling to navigate their own work schedule with their students. And then on the heels of that, the tragedy that took place. And with the shooting in Nova Scotia, I'm just, my heart just aches for our society right now. This is a terrible time with an incredible amount of stress, but as I said in my comments over spring break, as we were heading back in, Langley, both Langleys are very resilient communities. And I am so fortunate to live in a community that comes together when things get tough and support people for the right reasons and move forward and persevere as we have to come together as a community to deal with the tough times. I'd like to say to all of our senior leadership team, but especially Superintendent, Secretary, Treasurer, your work is just been outstanding and so demanding over the last couple of weeks. I don't know where our district would be without you coming forward with your leadership skills and moving us into what is a completely uncharted territory. I'd like to thank every single person who's coming forward and working in our schools right now, all the families who are rallying so hard to make sure that their students have the best experience they can under very difficult times. Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing, because this isn't easy. So with that, I wish you all well. We will see you back at the next meeting. And I hope that you stay safe and stay well. And thank you for tuning in tonight. I know we spent a lot of time on Zoom, all of us. And this evening is just another day. So thank you so much. So question period is where we're on to now. Question period is going to look a little different because we have this online platform and it's really impossible to streamline. So due to the online platform for this regular meeting, the process for question period is as follows. The board will not be taking questions from the member of the public in real time. We will encourage members of the public to please submit their questions by emailing feedback@sd35.bc.ca. Questions will be accepted up until 1 hour after the adjournment of the meeting. Board members or appropriate staff will respond to the individual directly to acknowledge that they've received the email within 24 hours. Therefore, a response will be provided to the individual. The following will help the public develop their questions for question period at a board meeting that is keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. Questions need to be directed at the chair and not staff. They need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda. They need to be succinct, focused, and not a statement. They may not be asked if they are related to personnel or directed to an individual trustee. And they may not be asked if they are related to contract negotiations. All the above are directions that are provided for in Policy 1204 bylaws of the board. Chair may answer or defer to staff or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public's interest and wants to ensure a professional meeting is conducted, with question period focused on providing guests with clarification they seek. Trustees are also welcome questions from members of the public apart from question period, and their contact information is available on the school district website. So, if there are any questions for the public, please submit them. With that, we have come to the end of the business of this meeting. It's now 9:27, and I ask for a motion to adjourn. Trustee Ward is moved a motion to adjourn, and that is seconded by Trustee Ross. So the meeting, all those in favor, or sorry, is anybody opposed to adjourning? Any opposition to adjourning? Seeing no opposition to adjourning, the meeting is now adjourned at 9:27 p.m. I hope everybody has a wonderful night. Take care. Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night.